He appreciates me more than you ever could. You're too boring for a trip like this. My name is Ethan. I'm 46, been working marketing strategy in San Diego for nearly 20 years. That morning, I stood in our driveway holding car keys, while my wife Vanessa packed her cruelty into words sharper than any blade I'd ever felt. Behind her stood Alec, her personal trainer. 6'2", tanned like a magazine cover, wearing sunglasses that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. He didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. Just stood there with this smug grin like he'd won something. I'd spent 3 months planning this trip. Europe. 7 days, 5 countries. Everything she'd ever mentioned wanting to see. Every restaurant she'd bookmarked on her phone when she thought I wasn't paying attention. The Louvre at sunrise. Dinner on the Seine. That little vineyard in Tuscany she'd seen in some travel magazine. I'm still going, she said, adjusting the strap of her designer purse. But not with you. She wasn't even carrying luggage. I'd assumed she'd forgotten something inside, maybe needed help with the bags. Instead, she was standing there like she was doing me a favor by explaining why another man deserved the trip I'd planned for her. 14 years of marriage, 14 anniversaries. I'd never missed one, never forgotten a birthday, never failed to notice when she changed her hair or bought something new. I'd supported her through 2 career changes, encouraged her fitness journey, even paid for the personal training sessions that apparently came with benefits I hadn't anticipated. The itinerary's in here, I said, handing her the silk envelope I'd prepared the night before. My voice came out steady, which surprised me. Flight leaves in 2 hours. She took it without looking at me. Alex already got his ticket, same flight. Same flight. She'd planned this, coordinated it, bought him a seat on the plane I'd booked for the trip I'd designed, using money I'd earned working 60-hour weeks to give her everything she wanted. I nodded once, got back in my car, and drove away. What she didn't know was that I'd paid for everything through my business account. Every hotel reservation, every dinner booking, every private tour guide. All under my name, tied to my identification, secured with 2-factor authentication that only my phone could access. As I pulled out of the driveway, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw them walking toward the Uber I'd called for us. Alec had his arm around her waist like he owned her. Maybe he did. But he didn't own the trip. I met Vanessa when I was 32 and still believed love conquered everything. She was working at a gallery downtown, had this way of talking about art that made ordinary paintings sound like they held secrets. I'd stop by after work just to hear her voice, to watch her hands move when she explained why some artist mattered. We married 2 years later. Small ceremony, mostly her friends. My parents had passed when I was in my 20s, and I'd never been good at keeping friendships alive once work consumed my life. Vanessa became my world. My only world looking back. I built my marketing consultancy from nothing. Started in our apartment's spare bedroom, taking on small clients while she pursued her gallery career. When business grew, I moved to an office. When it grew more, I hired employees. Every success meant I could give her more. Better restaurants, nicer vacations, the house in Mission Hill she'd fallen in love with during one of our Sunday drives. Somewhere along the way, she stopped talking about art and started talking about what we didn't have. The friends who traveled more, the couples with bigger houses, the women whose husbands took them to places that looked better on social media. "You work too much," became her favorite complaint. "You never want to do anything fun." But I was working for her, for us. Every client meeting, every late night at the office, every weekend spent building something that could support the life she wanted. I thought she understood that. The personal training started 6 months ago. "I need to feel good about myself again," she'd said. 3 sessions a week at some upscale gym in La Jolla, $200 a session, but she seemed happier, more confident. I was glad she'd found something that made her smile. Then came the longer sessions, the post-workout coffee meetings, the new clothes that seemed designed to show off her progress. The phone calls she'd take in the other room, speaking in lower voices about training schedules and nutrition plans. I'd started noticing things. How she'd gotten secretive about her phone. How she'd light up when it buzzed with certain notifications. How she'd started mentioning Alec in conversations. Little comments about his travels, his insights, his appreciation for the finer things. Alec says European hotels are completely different from American ones. More authentic. Alec thinks people our age don't travel enough. Says we get too comfortable. Alec has been to Paris 7 times. He knows all the places tourists never find. I should have seen it coming. Should have recognized that she wasn't just training her body. She was training herself to want someone else's life. Someone else. But I'd been too busy planning our anniversary trip to notice she'd already chosen her travel companion. I sat in my car for 20 minutes after leaving the house. Not moving, not thinking, just breathing. The envelope with their boarding passes was still on my passenger seat. I'd printed 2 copies of everything, like I always did. Backup plans for backup plans. My phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Don't wait up. Flight might be delayed. Flight might be delayed. Like she was going to visit her sister instead of stealing our anniversary trip with another man. That's when it hit me. Not anger, not betrayal, not the crushing weight of 14 years being flushed away. Just clarity. Cold, perfect clarity about who I'd married and who I'd become. I'd spent our entire relationship trying to earn her love through gestures and gifts and grand romantic plans. But love wasn't something you earned. It was something you gave, or didn't give. And Vanessa had stopped giving it long before she'd met Alec. I drove to my office and pulled up the trip folder on my computer. Every reservation, every confirmation number, every carefully planned detail. All secured through Zentren Global's business account, with me as the primary cardholder and sole authorized user. The hotel in Paris required photo identification matching the reservation name. The private tour guides had my cell phone as the only contact number. The restaurant bookings were confirmed through my email address with a 24-hour cancellation policy. I'd built this trip like I built everything else in my life. Methodically, thoroughly, with multiple layers of security and control. Vanessa thought she was taking my gift and giving it to someone else. What she didn't understand was that the gift had never really been hers. It was an experience I'd created, funded, and controlled from start to finish. My phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Keller, this is Continental Airlines. We're calling to confirm your departure time for Flight 447 to Paris. Actually, I said, I need to make some changes to that reservation. 20 minutes later, I'd rerouted my ticket to a different flight. Same destination, different airline, leaving 3 hours later. The original seats I'd booked for Vanessa and myself were now assigned to her and Alec, but my name remained on all the supporting documentation they'd need in Europe. I called my assistant. Jessica, I need you to book me a companion ticket on Lufthansa Flight 892 to Rome, departing tonight. Certainly, Mr. Keller. Should I ask who the second passenger will be? I thought about my sister Claire, who'd been telling me for years that I needed to take better care of myself, who'd divorced her own cheating husband 5 years ago and rebuilt her life from nothing. Claire Daniels, I said, my sister. It's time she saw Europe. I didn't wait for Vanessa's plane to take off. I already knew how this story ended. The call came 8 hours later. I was sitting in Rome's Fiumicino airport with Claire, sharing a bottle of Chianti while we waited for our connection to Florence. My phone showed Vanessa's name, but I let it ring. She called again immediately. This time I answered. Ethan. Her voice was tight, strained. There's been some kind of mistake with the hotel reservation. What kind of mistake? They're saying the room was canceled. The concierge is being incredibly rude. They won't honor the booking without the primary cardholder present. I took a sip of wine. Claire was watching me with raised eyebrows, but I kept my voice neutral. That's strange. Did you show them the confirmation email? Of course I showed them the email. They said it doesn't matter. Something about company policy and fraud prevention. Ethan, we're standing in the lobby with our luggage and they're treating us like criminals. Where's Alec? A pause. He's trying to book us another room, but everything's full. It's peak tourist season. Expensive time to travel, I said. Ethan, this isn't funny. I need you to call them and straighten this out. The number is... I'm in Italy, I interrupted. Silence. Then, what do you mean you're in Italy? Rome, actually. About to fly to Florence. Claire and I are having a wonderful time. The silence stretched longer. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. Lower. More controlled. You're supposed to be home. Why would I be home? It's our anniversary trip. But we're not. She struggled for words. You can't just take my sister on our anniversary trip. Your sister? Claire is my sister. And this was never your trip, Vanessa. It was mine. I planned it, I paid for it, and now I'm taking it. You bastard. The words came out like a hiss. You deliberately sabotaged us. I didn't sabotage anything. I simply took the trip I planned with someone who wanted to spend time with me. Alec and I are stranded here, do you understand that? We have nowhere to stay. Alec seems resourceful. I'm sure he'll figure something out. The credit card isn't working either. Which credit card? The travel card you gave me. It's being declined everywhere. Oh, I said, as if just remembering. I suspended that card this morning. Security precaution. You understand? Claire was grinning now, making exaggerated thumbs-up gestures. I had to work to keep the amusement out of my voice. Ethan. Vanessa's tone had shifted to something I hadn't heard in years, pleading. This is crazy. We can work this out when you get home, but right now we need help. We? I need help. Please. I'm asking you to help me. For 14 years, I'd responded to that tone. The moment she softened her voice and asked for help, I'd moved mountains to give her what she wanted. Fixed problems, solved crises, made things better. But sitting in that airport, watching travelers hurry past with their own stories and their own destinations, I realized something had shifted. The urgency I used to feel when she needed me was gone, replaced by something colder and cleaner. Vanessa, I said. 6 hours ago you told me I was too boring for this trip. You said another man appreciated you more than I ever could. You replaced me with your personal trainer and expected me to just accept it. That's not... I didn't mean... You meant every word. And now you're in Paris with him, just like you wanted. Enjoy it. I hung up. Claire raised her wine glass. To sisters who know when their brothers deserve better. We clinked glasses, and for the first time in months I smiled without forcing it. My phone buzzed with a text. This isn't over. I deleted it without reading it twice. Claire had questions during our flight to Florence, but she waited until we were settled in our hotel room, overlooking the Arno River, to ask them. How long has this been going on? I was unpacking the suitcase I'd thrown together in 20 minutes, trying to remember if I'd brought enough shirts for a week in Italy. The affair? I don't know. Months, probably. No, not the affair. How long have you been planning this? I stopped folding clothes and looked at her. Claire had always been the smarter sibling, 3 years younger than me, but she'd seen through people's bullshit since she was 16. When her ex-husband David started coming home late with weak excuses, she'd hired a private investigator within a week. When the divorce papers were filed, she already had copies of every relevant financial document and a clear strategy for keeping the house. I wasn't planning anything, I said. This morning I thought I was taking my wife on our anniversary trip. Ethan. She sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing her travel clothes. You don't accidentally cancel hotel reservations and freeze credit cards. You don't accidentally book your sister on a flight to Italy. You don't accidentally have documentation ready that keeps your soon-to-be ex-wife from accessing anything. I sat down across from her. What are you saying? I'm saying you've been preparing for this moment longer than you realize. Maybe not consciously, but you've been building walls around your finances, your business, your life. Like you knew something was coming. She was right. Over the past year, I'd quietly moved most of our joint assets into business accounts that required both our signatures to access. I'd updated all my passwords, secured my client database, even had my attorney review our prenuptial agreement. At the time, I told myself it was just good business practice, protecting the company from potential liability. But maybe it was more than that. Remember when you asked me to be your emergency contact for the business accounts? Claire continued. That was 8 months ago. You said it was in case something happened to you, but Vanessa was your wife. She should have been the logical choice. 8 months ago, right around the time Vanessa started her personal training sessions. I think part of you knew, Claire said gently. Maybe not the specifics, but you knew something was wrong. You just didn't want to face it. My phone rang. Vanessa again. This time I declined the call immediately. There's something else, I said. 3 weeks ago I found out she'd been using our joint credit card to pay for things that didn't make sense. Expensive dinners at restaurants I'd never been to. Hotel rooms in downtown San Diego when she was supposedly at the gym. Gifts from jewelry stores I didn't recognize. You didn't confront her? I thought about it, but then I realized something. If I confronted her, she'd either lie or tell me the truth. If she lied, I'd know she was lying and nothing would change. If she told me the truth, our marriage would be over. So instead you planned a trip that would force her to show her hand. I thought about that. Had I subconsciously set a trap, offered her the perfect opportunity to choose between her husband and her trainer, knowing which way she'd go? Maybe, I admitted. Maybe I needed to see it for myself. Needed to stop living in the space between suspicion and certainty. Claire nodded. And now you know. Now I know. My phone buzzed with another text from Vanessa. I turned it face down without reading it. So what happens next? Claire asked. I looked out the window at the ancient city spreading below us. Now we enjoy Florence. The next morning, while Claire explored the Uffizi Gallery, I sat in our hotel's business center making phone calls I should have made years ago. First call, my attorney. Robert, it's Ethan Keller. I need to discuss divorce proceedings. I'm sorry to hear that, Ethan. Are we talking about an amicable separation? No, we're talking about adultery, misuse of joint assets, and protecting my business interests. I see. When you're ready to file, we'll need documentation, financial records, evidence of misconduct, asset valuation. I've been collecting records for months, and as for evidence, she's currently in Paris with her personal trainer, using what she thought was my money to fund their romantic getaway. Excellent. California is a no-fault state, but adultery can still impact asset division, especially if marital funds were used to support the affair. Second call, my business banker. Mr. Keller, how can I help you? I need to remove my wife as an authorized user on all Zentren Global accounts, effective immediately. I also want to change all access codes and require additional verification for any transactions over $5,000. Of course. Should I also flag any attempts to access the accounts using her credentials? Yes, and send me a report of any attempted access. Third call, my accountant. Janet, I need a complete audit of all joint assets and any business expenses that might have been used for personal purposes over the past year. This sounds serious, Ethan. It is. I'm filing for divorce and I need to know exactly what my wife has been spending on her boyfriend. Fourth call, the locksmith. I need all the locks changed on my house in Mission Hills. Today, if possible. Are you locked out, sir? No. I'm preventing someone else from getting in. By lunch, I'd systematically dismantled every point of access Vanessa had to my life. Bank accounts secured, business protected, house locks changed, attorney retained. It felt like disconnecting a complicated machine, one wire at a time. Claire found me on the hotel terrace, reading emails on my laptop. You look different, she said, settling into the chair across from me. Different how? Lighter, like you've been carrying something heavy and finally put it down. She was right. For the first time in months, I wasn't wondering where Vanessa was or what she was really doing. I wasn't analyzing her moods or trying to decode her text messages. I wasn't planning elaborate gestures to win back attention that had already been given to someone else. My phone rang, Vanessa, for the 6th time that day. This time I answered. Hello? Ethan, thank God. We need to talk. About what? About this insanity you're pulling. Stranding us in Paris, cutting off our money, playing these games. What games? You know exactly what games, this whole revenge fantasy you're acting out. Revenge? I looked at Claire, who was pretending not to listen. Vanessa, I'm sitting on a terrace in Florence, drinking excellent wine with my sister, watching the sunset over the Duomo. I'm not plotting revenge. I'm having the trip I planned. With the wrong person. No, I said quietly. For the first time in a long time, I'm with exactly the right person. Ethan, I've changed the locks, I continued. Secured the accounts, contacted my attorney. By the time you get back to San Diego, you'll find divorce papers waiting. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. I hung up and turned off my phone. Claire raised her wine glass. To new beginnings. 3 months later, I sat in my attorney's office while he reviewed the final divorce settlement. Vanessa had tried to fight it, claiming she deserved half of everything I'd built during our marriage. But California law was clear about one thing. When joint marital assets were used to fund an extramarital affair, the innocent spouse could seek reimbursement. Every expensive dinner she'd charged to our credit card while dining with Alec. Every hotel room she'd booked for their afternoon encounters. Every gift she'd bought him with money from our joint account. Every cent I'd spent on her personal training sessions that had apparently included extra services. The final calculation, Robert said, sliding a document across his desk, shows misuse of marital assets totaling $47,000 over 8 months. $47,000. More than most people earned in a year, spent on an affair while she complained that I didn't appreciate her enough. And her share of the house? Given that you owned the property before the marriage and paid the mortgage entirely through business income, she'll receive a minimal settlement. Enough for a security deposit on an apartment. What about Alec? Robert smiled. Interesting development there. According to our investigator, Mr. Alec Morrison has returned to his wife and children in Orange County. Apparently, his European adventure with your ex-wife was just that, an adventure. He never had any intention of leaving his family. So Vanessa had destroyed our marriage for a man who'd never planned to stay with her. She'd traded 14 years of stability for a week in Paris with someone who'd seen her as entertainment. The papers are ready for your signature, Robert continued. Once filed, the divorce will be final in 6 months. I signed my name on each page, feeling nothing but relief. 6 months later, I was back in Italy. Not for revenge or closure or dramatic confrontation, but because I'd fallen in love with Florence during that first trip with Claire. I'd sold the house in Mission Hills and bought a small apartment overlooking the Arno River. Zentren Global was thriving. Freed from the constant drain of trying to satisfy someone who could never be satisfied, I'd poured my energy back into building something meaningful. 3 new clients, expanded services, a team that respected what we were creating together. I was reading on my terrace when my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I hope you're happy. Vanessa. Still trying to provoke some kind of reaction, I deleted the message without responding and went back to my book. The truth was, I was happy. Not the forced happiness I'd tried to maintain during the final years of our marriage, constantly working to convince myself that things were fine. Real happiness. The kind that came from waking up each morning without wondering what mood someone else would be in, what crisis I'd need to solve, what elaborate gesture I'd need to plan to earn approval I'd already paid for 1,000 times over. Claire visited every few months. She'd started dating again, a widowed professor who treated her like she was worth listening to. We'd have dinner at the little trattoria down the street from my apartment, talking about books and business and the strange relief of building a life based on what you actually wanted, instead of what someone else demanded. I never saw Vanessa again. I heard she'd moved to Los Angeles, working at another gallery, trying to rebuild the life she'd thrown away for a man who'd never intended to catch it. Sometimes the best revenge was simply living well.